Well, hello everyone, and if you're new to this channel, I hope you enjoy this video. I hope you enjoy all the videos on this channel, and please like and subscribe to this channel. If you are a returning viewer, I hope you continue to enjoy the videos on this channel. Now, I'm holding this particular golf ball for a reason today, because today we will be talking about the AVX Equatorial mount. The reason I am talking about this particular mount today is because it is a very popular equatorial mount that people, especially people who are interested and new to astrophotography, oftentimes get, mainly because of the price. And therefore, because of that, I want to give a short review on the equatorial mount so that you pretty much have some idea of what to expect when you decide to purchase this type of mount. What is an equatorial mount? Well, in the simplest terms, an equatorial mount takes into consideration the Earth's axis of rotation so that it is easier to track an object in the night sky, which is important when you're trying to take a picture of it, because you want to be able to take images basically without having to move it up and down as you would with an azimuth mount, which is we take into the basically the telescope can be parallel to the horizon. Now, what do I mean by axis of rotation? Well, when it comes to the Earth, so you can see this golf ball I have. Many people think as the Earth rotates around the sun that you see where it says it's tidaless, that the Earth is parallel to the sun. But that's not true. The Earth is actually tilted a little bit as it goes around the sun. And this is part of the reason why we have seasons. And what an equatorial mount does is that, as I don't know if you can see. But an equatorial mount has the option to tilt at certain degrees. And what that does is taking into the consideration basically the Earth's axis of rotation, which means as you observe an object, you are able to observe it as it's pointed, as the star is from the position of the Earth's true axis of rotation. And that's pretty much it for an equatorial mount. Now, I will say that if you're interested in visual astronomy and visual astronomy only, you probably don't need an equatorial mount. You can pretty much make good with an azimuth mount, and you don't need to worry about the Earth's axis of rotation. But if you are interested in astrophotography, then an equatorial mount is highly recommended. But as you'll find, and I like to say in these videos, when it comes to astronomy, there is no one size fits all. There have been people who are able to create great images with iPhones, with using equatorial mounts, using azimuth mounts. So you're not necessarily locked into a particular type of piece of equipment. It's just basically the ease of doing it, the skill level required for example, using an azimuth mount is much higher than using an equatorial mount if you want to get images. But it doesn't mean it can't be done. Okay, now back to the AVX. Alright, the AVX is relatively simple to use. It is a go-to mount, which basically means that I don't know. There you go. So not next star. Celestron has, for this particular telescope, allows the user to be able to align their telescope with certain objects in the night sky. It can be solar system objects, it can be bright stars, and by taking into consideration the time zone, the day of the year, the object that you align the telescope with, is able to access its database to have a good understanding of where the stars or the particular objects are at that particular point in time for that particular point of year. And therefore, basically all you have to do at that point is tell the telescope what you want to look at, and the telescope will go to that particular object. Now, I have tried this, and what basically ended up happening is that I do not use GoTo anymore. I either use my own knowledge of the night sky, where to look, a star map, or I use a star map that are in smartphones, and I'll do a video on an app that I use that is very accurate in where particular objects are in the night sky. And the reason for this is, in my particular experience, when I've used the GoTo feature on the AVX, it is often off by a few degrees. And therefore, I oftentimes have to point the object or move the telescope, or move my telescope to the object anyway, without using the GoTo feature. So in my experience, that particular part of the AVX is not necessarily been accurate. Now, it will get you there. It'll get you to the rough, it will get you to the rough area or rough estimation of where the object is. But if you're looking for, I'm trying to look for Jupiter, I do the alignment. I tell the mount to go to Jupiter, and Jupiter will be right in the middle of my eyepiece. When I look at it, that hasn't worked for me. I can only talk about my experience, but that hasn't worked for me when I've used this particular mount. Now, I will say though that the mount is relatively simple to use. Basically, all you do is you'll take your telescope, you'll mount it, and then you basically try to balance it. So you'll take your telescope, you'll try to balance it with the weight, and once it's balanced, then you'll set everything up and you'll lock everything in place, and you're basically good to go. If you want the polar alignment, which means you want to align it with the North Star if you're in the northern hemisphere, it has a little enclave here, and you'll put your polar alignment in here, and you see this, and then you can align it with Polaris or the North Star. And then you can begin the process of actually aligning it with, in order to do GoTo. Now, as it relates to, and you'll often see this if you're new to this channel, I mention this a lot. When it comes to astronomy, oftentimes the ease of use helps facilitate how often you go out in the night sky to observe the night sky. So therefore, you can have a wonderful telescope. It can have a large aperture so you can gather lots of light. You'll see lots of stars or galaxies or nebulas or planets in great detail. But if it's extremely heavy and it's hard for you, not your friend, not your associate, but it's hard for you to carry around, then you will not use it, or you won't use it as often as you like. Well, the thing I will say about the AVX, as opposed to the Azimuth mount that I have, is that the AVX is heavy and it is hard to transport. So when I was living in a house, the AVX was easy for me to transport because I could move it to close to the door. When it was time to go, I could just take it, put it in my truck at the time, and then go to different spots so I can observe. But when I started moving around the country and I no longer had that type of access, it can be difficult to move it from a fifth floor, third floor, take it to the elevator, go down, take it to the car, put it in the trunk, drive it, and do it all over again. So it is a heavy, heavy mount. And that, if you're not prepared for that, might not be a good purchase then, because if it's heavy, then you're not going to look forward to using the mount. And therefore, it will more likely begin to collect dust, and it's not worth a good purchase. So even though you've paid a reasonable price for the mount, if you're not going to use it because it's heavy, then you might as well pay for a mount that will allow you more mobility and to actually use it than pay less money for a mount that's extremely heavy. Now, for this particular for this particular mount, I use it for planetary astronomy. So I use it in my astrophotography when I'm taking pictures of planets, the moon. I use it for solar astrophotography. So the telescopes that I use are the Nexstar 8 SE. I use my Lunt 60 for this for this mount. And in both times that I've used it, or not both times, the multiple times that I've used it, I've had a good experience. It has allowed me to follow objects in the night sky, and I've been able to take excellent pictures. Now, I do not plan on using it for deep space astrophotography. Like I mentioned before, there are some people who are able to take good deep space images using an azimuth mount, iPhone, different types of equatorial mounts. But I've learned that doesn't work for me, because, at least for the AVX, is because when I'm doing it, I don't use GoTo, and I don't like its tracking system. And therefore, I usually have to do it manually to track objects in the night sky as I'm taking images. It's not as apparent when you're taking images of the sun, or you're taking images of the moon, or you're taking images of the planets. But when you are taking images of deep space and you have to do it for a long period of time in order to take good images, that can get kind of monotonous for me. And therefore, when I'm going to do deep space astrophotography, then I'm going to get another mount. But it's really, if some people, like I keep mentioning, there are other people who are able to do well with this type of mount. So that shouldn't stop you if price really is an issue. Because using this mount, I have been able to take great images. I have been able to do great visual astronomy. So it really is an okay mount for what you're paying for. But I have to be completely honest with the negatives in that it is heavy. It can be a struggle to move around, and its go-to feature isn't exactly the best. It gets you in the ballpark, but if you're expecting, as I mentioned previously, you put everything in, you tell it where to go, and it'll get you right in the center. You're expecting it to be in the center of your eyepiece or your or if you're using a computer right in the center of the screen, that hasn't worked for me. And therefore, I ended up going to using star maps and star maps on my iPhone in order to move the telescope or move the telescope to that particular object in the night sky. So, in conclusion, the AVX, I will say, is good for what you pay for it. It is a relatively I will consider this an entry level equatorial mount, and therefore if, as I mentioned previously in other videos, if you're just interested in doing astrophotography for friends and family, they're not going to know the difference. And it is good for what you pay for it, but if you're interested in doing deep space or taking it to a more professional level, then I would recommend looking for a different type of equatorial mount. But for entry-level people, it is a good mount in the sense that it fulfills its purpose. But I have to be honest about the negatives, and that it is heavy, and that its go-to isn't as accurate as I would like. And therefore, using those factors, I will take those factors into consideration when thinking about purchasing the AVX. Well, that is the end of the video. Please feel free to leave any comments, any questions that you may have in the comment section, and I will respond as soon as I can. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again.